The twin sons of Cathara Prime cast long shadows across the abandoned mining facility as three young Zephyrian cubs picked their way through the twisted metal and broken concrete. Their silvery fur caught the dying light, and their large amber eyes scanned nervously for any sign of danger. The ruins had been off-limits for over 2 cycles now, ever since the hegemony had declared the area contaminated, but hunger drove the orphaned cubs to search for anything valuable they might trade for food. Zix, the eldest at barely 8 standard years, led his younger siblings deeper into the wreckage. His sister Nala followed close behind, her smaller frame allowing her to squeeze through gaps in the debris that he had to climb over. Little Kor, youngest of the 3, brought up the rear, his stubby legs working hard to keep pace with his older siblings. "There," Zix whispered, pointing with a clawed finger toward a partially collapsed structure that might once have been an equipment shed. "If we're lucky, there might be some tools or metal scraps the salvage crews missed." The cubs had been living on their own for 3 months now, ever since their parents had been killed in a hegemony raid on their village. The official report claimed they were harboring rebels, but Zix knew better. His father had been a teacher, his mother a medic. Their only crime had been helping anyone who needed it, regardless of their species or political beliefs. As they approached the shed, Nala's ears suddenly perked up. Her hearing had always been better than her brother's, a trait that had saved them from hegemony patrols more than once. She grabbed Zix's arm and pulled him behind a chunk of fallen concrete, motioning for Kor to follow. "What is it?" Zix mouthed silently. Nala pointed toward the shed. At first, Zix saw nothing unusual. Then he heard it too, a low, rhythmic sound that didn't belong to the wind or settling debris. It was breathing, but not the breathing of any species he recognized. Too slow for a Zephyrian, too deep for a Krathan, and completely wrong for a hegemony soldier. The cubs crouched in silence for several minutes, watching and listening. The breathing continued, sometimes interrupted by what sounded like soft moans of pain. Someone was hurt in there, badly by the sound of it. Zix's mind raced through the possibilities. It could be a trap. The hegemony was known to use wounded prisoners as bait to catch rebels or other dissidents. But if it was a real person in need of help, could they just walk away? Their parents had taught them that helping others was one of the most important things a person could do, even when it was dangerous. The decision was made for him when Kor suddenly stood up and started walking toward the shed. "Kor, no," Zix hissed, but his little brother either didn't hear him or chose to ignore the warning. Nala grabbed Zix's arm. "We have to follow him. You know how he gets when he thinks someone needs help." It was true. Despite being the youngest, Kor had the biggest heart of the 3 siblings. He once tried to rescue a wounded Crixbird with a broken wing, even though the creatures were known to be vicious when cornered. The bird had nearly taken his eye out with its razor-sharp beak, but Kor still insisted on nursing it back to health. With no choice but to follow, Zix and Nala crept after their brother. They found him standing at a gap in the shed's wall, his small head tilted to one side as he listened to the sounds from within. "There's someone in there," Kor whispered when his siblings caught up to him. "They're hurt really bad." Zix peered through the gap and gasped. Inside the shed, partially hidden under a pile of salvaged fabric and metal scraps, lay a creature unlike any he had ever seen. It was roughly humanoid in shape, but larger than a Zephyrian, with pale skin instead of fur and strange, sparse hair covering only the top of its head. Its clothing was torn and bloody, and one arm hung at an unnatural angle. But what made Zix's breath catch in his throat wasn't the creature's alien appearance. It was the device strapped to its wrist. Even damaged and partially covered in debris, he could see it was technology far more advanced than anything the hegemony possessed. Sleek, seamless surfaces caught what little light filtered into the shed, and symbols that seemed to shift and change flickered across a small display. "What is it?" Nala breathed, pressing close to her brother to get a better look. "I don't know," Zix admitted. "But look at that device. I've never seen anything like it." The creature stirred, and 3 pairs of amber eyes watched as it slowly opened its own eyes. Where Zephyrian eyes were large and golden, this being's were smaller, darker, and more focused. When its gaze fell on the 3 cubs peering at it through the gap in the wall, it didn't show fear or aggression. Instead, it tried to smile, though the effort was clearly painful. "Hello there," the creature said in accented but understandable galactic standard. Its voice was deeper than a Zephyrian's, but somehow warmer. "Don't be afraid, I won't hurt you." Kor, true to form, was the first to respond. He squeezed through the gap in the wall before his siblings could stop him and approached the wounded stranger. "You're bleeding," he said with the matter-of-fact concern that only young children possessed. "Do you need help?" The creature, no person, Zix corrected himself, because anyone who could speak so kindly despite being in obvious pain deserved to be called a person, nodded slowly. "I could use some help, yes, but it might be dangerous for you to be seen with me." "Why?" Nala asked, having followed her younger brother through the gap. "Are you a criminal?" "Not exactly," the stranger replied, "but the people looking for me might not care about the difference. Let's say I'm not supposed to be here." Zix studied the stranger's face, looking for signs of deception. His father had taught him that eyes were the windows to a person's true nature, and this being's eyes showed pain and exhaustion, but also kindness and an odd sort of sadness. There was no malice there, no hint of the cold cruelty that Zix had learned to associate with hegemony soldiers. "What's your name?" Kor asked, settling down cross-legged beside the wounded stranger as if they were old friends meeting for tea. "Marcus," the being replied. "Marcus Chen, and you three are." "I'm Kor," the youngest cub said proudly. "These are my brother and sister, Zix and Nala. We're looking for things to trade for food." Marcus's expression grew sad. "You're alone. Where are your parents?" Zix saw Nala's ears droop and felt his own heart clench. "Dead," he said simply. "The hegemony killed them." Something changed in Marcus's eyes at those words. The sadness remained, but it was joined by something harder, more determined. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "No child should have to go through that." "Lots of children have to go through that," Nala said with a bitterness that seemed far too old for her years. "The hegemony doesn't care about families. They only care about control." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the three cubs with those strange, dark eyes. Finally, he spoke again. "How would you like to help me do something that might make the hegemony very, very angry?" Zix felt a chill run down his spine, but not from fear. For the first time since his parents' death, he felt something that might have been hope. "What did you have in mind?" Before Marcus could answer, the sound of approaching aircrafts echoed through the ruins. The distinctive whine of hegemony patrol ships was unmistakable, and it was getting louder. "They found me," Marcus muttered, struggling to sit up despite his injuries. "Listen to me, all of you. There's a hidden compartment in my ship about 2 kilometers north of here. Inside, you'll find supplies and information that could help a lot of people, but if the hegemony gets their hands on it." The sound of the ships was much closer now, and Zix could hear the heavy footsteps of soldiers in powered armor making their way through the ruins. "Can you walk?" Nala asked urgently. Marcus tried to stand but collapsed back against the wall with a grunt of pain. "Not far. My leg's broken, and I think I have some internal injuries." Kor, who had been listening intently to the approaching soldiers, suddenly grabbed Marcus's uninjured arm. "There's another way out. We know all the hidden paths through the ruins, but you have to trust us." Marcus looked at the three young faces staring down at him and made his decision. Lead the way. What happened next would be talked about in hushed whispers throughout the sector for years to come. 3 orphaned cubs, none older than 8 standard years, helped a mysterious stranger evade an entire hegemony search party. They used every trick they had learned during 3 months of survival, hidden passages through the debris, concealed tunnels that connected the underground maintenance areas, and most importantly, the ability to move silently through terrain that would challenge even experienced soldiers. Marcus, despite his injuries, proved to be surprisingly capable of following their lead. He never once complained about the pain or asked them to slow down, even when they had to crawl through spaces barely large enough for a full-grown being. There was something about him that reminded Zix of his father, a quiet strength that made others feel safe even in dangerous situations. They emerged from the ruins just as the twin suns set completely, plunging the landscape into the purple twilight of Cathara Prime's evening. Behind them, searchlights swept through the abandoned mining facility, and the shouts of frustrated soldiers echoed off the broken walls. "This way," Zix whispered, leading the group toward a series of low hills that would provide cover from the aerial patrols. "There's a cave system about an hour's walk from here. The soldiers won't find us there." As they made their way across the rocky terrain, Marcus finally asked the question that had been weighing on all their minds. "Why are you helping me? You don't know anything about me. I could be a dangerous criminal, a spy, or worse." Kor answered immediately. Because you're hurt and you need help, that's what people do, they help each other. Even if it's dangerous. Especially if it's dangerous, Nala added. Our parents taught us that the right thing to do is usually the hard thing to do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. Your parents sound like they were remarkable people. They were, Zix said simply, and they would have helped you too. As they reached the relative safety of the caves, Marcus settled against a smooth rock wall and looked at the three cubs who had risked everything to help a stranger. In the dim light of Cathara's smaller moon, he could see their determination and courage, and he knew that his mission had just become much more complicated. Because the information he carried wasn't just valuable, it was the key to overthrowing the entire hegemony. And now 3 innocent children were involved, whether they knew it or not. The device on his wrist flickered to life, displaying a message that made his blood run cold. The hegemony had detected the activation of his ship's emergency beacon. They knew exactly where his vessel was hidden, which meant they would find the backup copies of his research within hours. Unless, of course, someone got there first. Marcus looked at the 3 young faces watching him with a mixture of curiosity and concern, and made a decision that would change all their lives forever. How would you 3 like to learn about a secret that could free every world under hegemony control? The caves beneath the hills of Cathara Prime had been carved by underground rivers millions of years ago, creating a natural maze of tunnels and chambers that even the hegemony's best scouts couldn't map completely. Zix had discovered this particular system during their first week as orphans, when desperation and hunger had driven them to explore every possible shelter. Now, sitting in the largest chamber while Marcus rested his injured leg, the 3 cubs listened to a story that challenged everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The hegemony tells everyone that humans went extinct over 1,000 years ago, Marcus began, his voice echoing softly off the stone walls. They claim that humanity destroyed itself in a series of wars and that the galaxy is better off without them. Kor's ears perked up with curiosity. But you're human, aren't you? That's why you look so different from us. Marcus nodded. I am, and so were the creators of almost every piece of advanced technology the hegemony uses to maintain control over the galaxy. Nala frowned, her young mind trying to process this information. That doesn't make sense. If humans created all that technology, how could they have gone extinct, and why would the hegemony lie about it? Because, Marcus said, pulling up the sleeve of his torn shirt to reveal more of the device strapped to his wrist, the truth is much more complicated than extinction. Humans didn't die out, they left. The device projected a 3-dimensional star map into the air above them, showing the known galaxy with all its various systems and trade routes. But as Marcus manipulated the controls, the map expanded, revealing vast regions of space that no hegemony ship had ever explored. 1,000 years ago, humanity made first contact with what would eventually become the Hegemony Council, Marcus continued. At first, things went well. We shared technology, knowledge, even art and music. But as more species joined the alliance, some leaders began to see humans as a threat. Why? Zix asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. Because humans have a tendency to ask uncomfortable questions. They wanted to know why some species were given more representation on the council than others. Why certain worlds were strip-mined for resources while others lived in luxury. Why the military seemed more interested in conquering new systems than protecting the ones that already existed. Marcus touched another control, and the star map zoomed in on a cluster of systems near the galaxy's edge. Several planets were marked with symbols that pulsed with a soft blue light. When it became clear that the hegemony was more interested in building an empire than maintaining an alliance, a group of human scientists and engineers began working on a secret project. They called it the Exodus Protocol. The blue symbols on the map suddenly connected with lines of light, forming a network that extended beyond the edge of known space. Quantum tunnel generators, Marcus explained. Technology that could create stable wormholes across vast distances, allowing instantaneous travel between any 2 points in the galaxy. The humans used this network to evacuate their entire population to a new galaxy, leaving behind only automated systems and a few volunteers who stayed to monitor hegemony activities. Nala's eyes went wide. An entire species just left. Not just left, Marcus corrected. They built a new civilization, free from the corruption and oppression that was spreading through this galaxy. But they also left behind something else, a gift for any species brave enough to use it. He manipulated the device again, and the star map was replaced by technical schematics that were far too advanced for the Cubs to understand. But even they could see that the designs were elegant, powerful, and completely unlike anything they had ever seen. "The quantum tunnel network is still active," Marcus said quietly. "Hidden, protected, and waiting for someone to activate it. Every oppressed world, every enslaved species, every person who dreams of freedom, they could all use this network to escape to the new galaxy, where humans have built a society based on cooperation instead of domination." Kor clapped his small hands together in excitement. "That's wonderful. Why doesn't everyone know about this?" Marcus's expression grew grim. "Because the hegemony has spent the last 1,000 years systematically destroying any evidence that the network exists. They've rewritten history, eliminated researchers who got too close to the truth, and turned the very mention of humanity into a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition." "But you have proof," Zix said, looking at the device on Marcus's wrist. "That's why they're hunting you. This contains complete specifications for a quantum tunnel generator, along with the activation codes for the entire network," Marcus confirmed. "I was supposed to deliver it to a resistance cell on Vraxis Station, but my ship was sabotaged before I could reach the rendezvous point." The Cubs sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. The technology they were looking at could literally reshape the galaxy, freeing billions of beings from hegemony oppression. But it was also the most dangerous secret in known space, and they were now part of it whether they wanted to be or not. "What will you do now?" Nala asked finally. Marcus looked at his damaged leg and sighed. "I'm not going anywhere fast. The hegemony will eventually search these caves, and when they do, they'll find me and the device. Unless—" He trailed off, looking at the three young faces surrounding him with an expression that was half hope and half reluctance. "Unless what?" Zix demanded. "Unless someone else completes the mission for me." The cave fell silent except for the distant drip of water and the soft whistle of wind through the tunnel entrances. Outside, the sound of hegemony search parties could still be heard, growing closer with each passing hour. "You want us to take that thing to Vraxis Station?" Nala asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Vraxis Station is 3 systems away," Zix protested. "We're children, we don't have a ship, and we don't know anything about quantum physics or resistance cells or any of this." Marcus smiled sadly. "You know more than you think. You've survived 3 months on your own in a hostile environment. You rescued a complete stranger without knowing whether he was friend or enemy. And most importantly, you understand something that many adults have forgotten, that helping others is worth any risk." Kor had been unusually quiet during the conversation, but now he spoke up. "What happens to all the people under hegemony control if we don't take the device to Vraxis Station?" "They stay enslaved," Marcus answered honestly. "The resistance movements on dozens of worlds will continue fighting with inferior weapons and outdated tactics. Millions of beings will live and die under hegemony oppression, never knowing that freedom was possible." "And what happens if we try to complete your mission and get caught?" Marcus met the young Cub's gaze directly. "The hegemony doesn't show mercy to rebels, regardless of their age." Zix felt his heart hammering in his chest. Everything logical told him to refuse, to find a way to get his siblings to safety and forget they had ever met the strange human with his impossible technology. But as he looked at Kor and Nala, he could see the same determination in their eyes that had driven them to help Marcus in the first place. "How would we even get off-planet?" he asked. "The spaceports are all controlled by the hegemony and they screen every passenger." Marcus's smile became a bit more genuine. "Remember when I mentioned that my ship had a hidden compartment? It contains more than just backup data. There's also a small but very fast courier vessel, something humans call a ghost ship, because it's virtually invisible to conventional sensors." He manipulated his device again, bringing up a schematic of a sleek, angular spacecraft that looked like it had been designed by someone who understood the poetry of motion. "It's equipped with a basic quantum tunnel generator, which means it can make short-range jumps without using traditional hyperspace lanes. You could reach Vraxis Station in less than 2 days, avoiding every hegemony patrol between here and there." Nala leaned forward, studying the ship's design with the focused attention of someone who had always been fascinated by technology. What about life support, food, navigation? All automated. The ship's AI was programmed by humans, which means it has a very different attitude toward authority than hegemony technology. It will follow your instructions as long as they don't violate basic safety protocols. And the resistance cell on Vrax's station? Zix asked. How do we find them? You don't, they'll find you. The moment you activate the ship's quantum communicator, they'll know that someone with access to human technology is trying to make contact. The hard part will be convincing them that 3 Zephyrian cubs are legitimate agents instead of hegemony spies. Kor giggled at that. I don't think anyone would believe we're spies. We're not very good at being sneaky. You were sneaky enough to get me away from an entire search party, Marcus pointed out. And you've been avoiding hegemony patrols for 3 months. Don't underestimate yourselves. A distant rumble echoed through the caves, followed by the unmistakable sound of military vehicles approaching the hills. The search parties had finished combing through the ruins and were expanding their perimeter. They're getting close, Nala observed with forced calm. Marcus struggled to his feet, wincing as his broken leg took weight. There's a back entrance to this cave system that leads to a ravine about half a kilometer from my ship's location. If you're going to do this, you need to leave now. Zix looked at his siblings, seeing his own fear and determination reflected in their young faces. They had a choice to make, and it would define the rest of their lives. They could take the safe path, find a way to slip past the search parties and disappear into the underground networks of orphans and refugees that existed on every hegemony world. It would be a hard life, but it would be life. Or they could take Marcus's device, steal a human ship using technology they didn't understand, and attempt to deliver galaxy-changing secrets to rebels they had never met. If we do this, Zix said slowly, and something happens to us, what happens to the information? Marcus held up his wrist, showing them a small panel on the device that glowed with a soft red light. Dead man's switch. If I don't input a specific code every 12 hours, the device automatically transmits all its data to every resistance cell in the galaxy. It won't be as effective as a coordinated delivery, but the information will survive. And if we succeed? If you succeed, you'll have given billions of beings the chance to choose freedom over slavery. The hegemony's power is built on controlling access to advanced technology and maintaining the illusion that resistance is futile. Once people know that there's an entire galaxy where former slaves have built a better society, that illusion becomes much harder to maintain. The rumble of vehicles was getting louder, and now they could hear the distinctive whine of sensor sweeps as the hegemony forces used their equipment to probe the cave entrances. We need to decide now, Nala said urgently. Kor stood up and walked over to Marcus, looking up at the wounded human with absolute trust. Teach us how to use the device. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself to the young cub's eye level. Are you sure, all of you? Zix and Nala exchanged a look, and in that moment, they both knew that there was really only one choice they could live with. Their parents had died fighting the hegemony's oppression in their own small way. How could their children do any less when presented with the opportunity to strike a blow that could topple the entire system? We're sure, Zix said firmly. Marcus quickly showed them how to operate the device, explaining the basic controls and the emergency procedures they would need to know. The technology was remarkably intuitive, designed by humans who understood that the most advanced systems were useless if people couldn't figure out how to use them quickly. Remember, Marcus said as he carefully removed the device from his wrist and handed it to Zix, you're not just carrying data, you're carrying hope. Every being who dreams of freedom is counting on you even if they don't know it yet. The sound of boots on stone echoed from the tunnel entrance, still distant but getting closer with each passing second. Go, Marcus said quietly, and thank you, your parents would be proud. As the 3 cubs made their way through the narrow back passage that would lead them to Marcus's hidden ship, none of them looked back. They were too young to understand the full implications of what they had just committed to do, but old enough to know that their lives would never be the same. Behind them, Marcus Chen settled back against the cave wall and began the process of purging his personal memories from the device they now carried. If the hegemony captured him, they would find nothing useful. The real secrets were now in the hands of three orphaned children who had already proven themselves braver than most adults. The irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity had left the galaxy to escape corruption and oppression, but in the end, it might be the galaxy's youngest inhabitants who would lead everyone else to freedom. The ravine that concealed Marcus's ship was a natural formation carved by centuries of seasonal flooding, its steep walls lined with crystalline deposits that would confuse most sensor arrays. As the three cubs made their way down the treacherous slope, following coordinates displayed on the device now secured around Zix's wrist, they could hear the hegemony search teams growing more distant behind them. The ship, when they finally found it, was nothing like what any of them had expected. Zephyrian spacecraft were typically blocky, utilitarian vessels designed for efficiency rather than elegance. Hegemony military ships were angular and intimidating, bristling with weapons and armor plating that announced their purpose to anyone who saw them. But the human ship hidden beneath a camouflage field that bent light around its hull was something else entirely. "It's beautiful," Nala breathed, unconsciously reaching out toward the graceful curves of the vessel's exterior. The ship was roughly the size of a small transport, but its organic lines made it look like it had been grown rather than built. When Zix activated the access protocol Marcus had taught him, the camouflage field shimmered and vanished, revealing a hull that seemed to shift color depending on the angle of view. A section of the ship's side dilated open like an iris, revealing an interior that glowed with soft, warm light. The three cubs exchanged nervous glances before Kor, predictably, stepped forward first. "Hello," he called into the ship's interior. "Marcus said you would help us." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice spoke from hidden speakers, warm and distinctly female despite its artificial origin. "Scanning," the voice announced. "Three Zephyrian juveniles, ages approximately 6 to 8 standard years. No weapons detected. Biometrics indicate elevated stress levels consistent with fear and excitement. One individual carries a Class Alpha human technology device." The voice paused, and when it continued, there was something that might have been surprise in its tone. "Authentication confirmed. Welcome aboard the Whispered Promise. I am Arya, the ship's artificial intelligence. Please enter quickly. I am detecting hegemony sensor sweeps approaching this location." The cubs scrambled aboard, and the iris door sealed behind them with a soft whisper of displaced air. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior, with walls that seemed to glow with their own inner light and floors that provided perfect traction despite feeling somehow soft underfoot. "Marcus told us you would take us to Vraxis Station," Zix said, trying to keep his voice steady as he looked around at technology that was clearly decades ahead of anything the hegemony possessed. "I have those instructions in my memory core," Arya confirmed. "However, I must inform you that my previous operator failed to mention that his replacement crew would consist entirely of children." "Is that a problem?" Nala asked, a note of defiance creeping into her voice. She had spent 3 months being told by various adults that she and her brothers were too young, too small, or too inexperienced to survive on their own. She was tired of being underestimated. "On the contrary," Arya replied, and there was definite amusement in her voice now. "Human history suggests that some of the most important missions are best entrusted to individuals who are too young to understand why they should be impossible." The ship's interior rearranged itself around them as they spoke, walls flowing like liquid to create acceleration couches perfectly sized for their small frames. Displays appeared in midair, showing the surrounding terrain and the positions of the hegemony search teams. "Please secure yourselves," Arya instructed. "We will be departing immediately. Our destination is Vraxis Station, distance approximately 18 light-years. Estimated travel time using conventional hyperspace would be 14 standard days. However, I am equipped with a quantum tunnel generator that will reduce our journey to 37 hours. Zix felt his stomach lurch as the ship lifted off without any of the vibration or noise he associated with spacecraft launches. Through the transparent walls that had replaced the solid bulkheads, he could see the ravine falling away beneath them as the Whispered Promise rose into Cathara Prime's evening sky. "The hegemony ships will detect us," Nala pointed out, watching the sensor displays that showed several patrol vessels converging on their previous location. "Unlikely," Arya said with what sounded suspiciously like smugness. This vessel is equipped with adaptive camouflage, quantum phase shifters, and sensor scramblers that are approximately 400 years ahead of current hegemony technology. To their instruments, we appear to be nothing more than a minor atmospheric disturbance. As if to prove her point, they passed directly through the formation of hegemony ships without causing so much as a blip on any of their sensors. The Cubs watched in amazement as massive warships drifted past them like sleeping giants, their crews completely unaware that the fugitive they were hunting for was slipping away right under their noses. "How is this possible?" Zix asked, studying the readouts that showed their ship's energy signature being automatically adjusted to match the background radiation of space. Human engineering philosophy differs significantly from that employed by most galactic civilizations, Arya explained as they broke free of the planet's atmosphere and began accelerating toward the system's edge. Where most species focus on building bigger and more powerful systems, humans tend to focus on building smarter ones. The ship's interior continued to adapt to its new passengers, providing them with food that tasted remarkably similar to traditional Zephyrian cuisine and clothing that adjusted its size and temperature automatically. Most impressive of all, the artificial gravity remained perfectly stable even as they performed maneuvers that should have been impossible for a ship of their size. "Tell us about the humans," Kor said as they settled in for the journey. "Marcus said they left because they didn't like how the galaxy was being run." "That is a significant simplification, but essentially accurate," Arya replied. The walls around them shifted to display images of human cities, artwork, and technology that took the Cubs' breath away. Humans have a cultural tendency toward what they call enlightened stubbornness. They become very difficult to control when they believe that authority is being exercised unjustly. The images showed humans working alongside dozens of different alien species, building cities that floated in the clouds of gas giants, tamming hostile worlds through terraforming technology that worked with existing ecosystems rather than destroying them. "Where did they go?" Nala asked, captivated by scenes of vast space habitats that looked more like gardens than starships. "The Andromeda Galaxy," Arya answered. "Far enough away that they cannot be pursued by conventional technology, but close enough that they can maintain contact with this galaxy through the quantum tunnel network. And they just left everyone else behind." "Not everyone," Arya corrected. "The evacuation was offered to any species that wished to participate. However, most galactic governments refused to allow their populations to learn about the opportunity. The Hegemony Council declared the entire project an act of rebellion and began systematically hunting down anyone involved." Zix thought about that as the ship continued its journey toward the system's edge, where they would activate the quantum tunnel generator for the first time. The idea that an entire species would abandon their home rather than submit to injustice was both inspiring and terrifying. "What's it like?" he asked finally. "The other galaxy." "I have limited data as I have never traveled there myself," Arya admitted. "However, my creators programmed me with memories of the early colonization efforts. From what I understand, it is better, not perfect, but better. Humans learned from the mistakes they observed here and built something new." The ship shuddered slightly as they reached the edge of Cathara Prime's solar system and began preparations for quantum tunneling. The Cubs watched in fascination as space itself seemed to fold around them, creating a passage through dimensions that their minds couldn't quite comprehend. "Initiating quantum tunnel in 10 seconds, Arya announced. "Please remain calm. Some passengers experienced disorientation during their first transition." What followed was the strangest experience of any of their young lives. For just a moment, it felt like they were everywhere and nowhere at once, as if their consciousness had been scattered across the entire galaxy before being gathered back together. Then reality snapped back into focus, and they were sailing through normal space in a completely different star system. "Transition complete," Arya announced. "Welcome to the Altair system. Vraxis station is approximately 4 hours away at our current velocity." Nala pressed her face against the transparent wall, staring out at stars that were arranged in completely unfamiliar patterns. "We really did it," she whispered. "We traveled 18 light-years in less than a second." "The first of many impossible things you will accomplish before this mission is complete," Arya observed. "I suggest you use the remaining travel time to rest. Vraxis station is complicated." "What do you mean?" Zix asked, though he was already beginning to suspect that their mission was about to become much more dangerous. Vraxis Station is officially a hegemony trading post and refueling depot, Arya explained. However, it also serves as a covert meeting place for various resistance movements throughout this sector. The individuals you are meant to contact operate under deep cover, maintaining their positions within hegemony society while secretly coordinating rebellion efforts. Images of Vraxis Station appeared on the walls around them, showing a massive space station that looked like a metal flower blooming in the void. Thousands of ships of every size and design docked at its petals, while streams of cargo and passengers flowed through its corridors like blood through arteries. The resistance cell you seek is led by a Krathan engineer named Vas Caldera, Arya continued. She has been working to undermine hegemony infrastructure for over 10 years, all while maintaining her cover as a loyal station maintenance supervisor. "How will we find her?" Kor asked. "You won't need to. The moment we dock, she will find you. The question is whether she will believe that 3 Zephyrian cubs are legitimate couriers rather than hegemony agents, or, worse, innocent children who have stumbled into something far beyond their understanding." Zix looked down at the device strapped to his wrist, its displays showing information that could reshape the galaxy. For the first time since they had left the caves, he began to understand the true magnitude of what they were attempting. They weren't just carrying data, they were carrying revolution. And revolution, as his parents had learned, was the most dangerous force in the galaxy. "Arya," he said quietly. "Yes, Zix. If something goes wrong on the station, if we get caught or killed, will you make sure the information gets to someone who can use it?" The ship was quiet for a long moment before Arya responded. "I am programmed to complete this mission regardless of the fate of my passengers. However, I want you to know that Marcus chose you for this task not because you were convenient, but because you demonstrated the exact qualities that my creators valued most highly. Which are compassion, courage, and the absolute refusal to abandon someone in need. These are the traits that built the human civilization in Andromeda, and they are the traits that will eventually free this galaxy from oppression." As Vraxis Station grew larger ahead of them, the 3 cubs prepared themselves for the next phase of their impossible mission. They had successfully stolen a ship, traveled across the galaxy, and evaded hegemony detection. Now came the hard part. Now they had to convince a seasoned rebel that the future of galactic freedom rested in the hands of 3 orphaned children who just wanted to help a stranger in need. Vraxis Station sprawled across space like a mechanical city, its multiple rings rotating slowly to generate artificial gravity for the millions of beings who called it home. As the whispered promise approached the docking bay assigned to them by the station's automated traffic control, the 3 cubs pressed against the transparent walls to stare at the incredible diversity of ships, species, and cargo flowing through the massive structure. "Remember," Arya said as they prepared to disembark, "you are tourists from Cathara Prime, traveling with your guardian who is currently resting in his cabin due to illness. Your cover identities are loaded into standard datapads, complete with travel visas and medical records." Zix accepted the datapad she offered him, marveling at how the human AI had managed to create documentation that would fool even hegemony security scanners. "What if someone asks to see our guardian?" "Tell them he has Andorian flu and is highly contagious," Arya suggested. "Most species will accept that excuse without requesting verification." The docking bay they entered was a vast cavern filled with the constant noise of loading equipment, shouting workers, and ship engines cycling through their startup sequences. Hundreds of different languages mixed together in a babble that somehow managed to be both overwhelming and oddly comforting. "Stay close," Nala whispered as they made their way through the crowds. "I've never seen so many different species in one place." It was true. Zephyrians mixed with tall, crystalline Vorthak, their translucent bodies chiming softly as they moved. Stocky, four-armed hegemony soldiers in their distinctive blue uniforms stood at checkpoints, scanning documents and questioning travelers. Most numerous of all were the various humanoid species that made up the bulk of the hegemony's civilian population. Krathans with their scaled skin and golden eyes, Altarians with their bird-like features and brilliant plumage, and dozens of others that the cubs had only seen in educational broadcasts. They had been walking for less than 10 minutes when a maintenance cart pulled up beside them. driven by a Krathan female whose bright orange scales marked her as a member of the station's engineering staff. "You three look lost," the driver said in accented Galactic Standard. Her voice was warm but carried an undertone of authority that suggested she was used to being obeyed. "First time on Vraxis." Zix's heart began beating faster as he realized this might be their contact. "Yes, we're here with our guardian, but he's sick and we're supposed to meet someone." The Krathan's golden eyes studied them carefully, and Zix could see her taking in details that most adults would miss. The way they stood protectively close to each other, the quality of their clothing, and most importantly, the device partially hidden beneath Zix's sleeve. "Climb in," she said finally. "I'm Voss, and I think I know who you're looking for." The maintenance cart wound its way through service corridors that tourists never saw, past massive fusion reactors and atmosphere processors that kept the station's environment stable. Voss drove in silence, occasionally glancing at her young passengers through the cart's rearview mirror. "When I received the coded transmission from Marcus," she said eventually, "I expected him to send experienced agents. I did not expect 3 children who look like they should be in school rather than carrying state secrets." "Are you going to turn us in?" Kor asked with the directness that only young children could manage. Voss laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "If I were going to turn you in, I would have driven you to the security checkpoint instead of my workshop. The question is whether you understand what you're carrying and why it's important." They arrived at a maintenance bay deep in the station's industrial section, where the constant hum of machinery masked all other sounds. Voss sealed the entrances and activated privacy shields that would prevent anyone from overhearing their conversation. "Show me," she said simply. Zix hesitated for a moment, then pulled back his sleeve to reveal Marcus's device. The moment Voss saw it, her entire demeanor changed. Her golden eyes widened, and she actually took a step backward. "By the ancient flames," she breathed. "That's a genuine human quantum interface. I've only seen them in intelligence reports, and those were declared destroyed centuries ago." She approached carefully, as if the device might explode at any moment. "May I examine it? I promise I won't try to take it from you." Zix extended his arm, and Voss studied the device with the focused attention of an engineer who understood exactly what she was looking at. Her scaled hands hovered over the displays, not quite touching, but clearly reading the information scrolling across them. "This contains the complete specifications for quantum tunnel technology," she murmured, her voice filled with awe. "And the activation codes for the entire network. Do you understand what this means?" "It means people can escape to the other galaxy where the humans went," Nala said. "Marcus said it could free everyone from the hegemony." "It could do much more than that," Voss corrected. "This technology doesn't just offer escape, it offers the ability to strike back. Imagine being able to move resistance forces instantly across the galaxy, or to evacuate entire populations before hegemony fleets could respond. This is the key to ending their oppression forever." She stood up and began packing around the workshop, her excitement evident in every movement. "For 10 years, I've been sabotaging hegemony equipment and feeding information to resistance cells throughout this sector. But it's been like fighting a forest fire with a bucket of water. We could slow them down, but we could never hope to actually defeat them." "And now," Zix asked. "Now we have a chance to burn down their entire empire," Voss said with fierce satisfaction. "But first, we need to get this information to the other resistance leaders, and that's where things become complicated." She activated a holographic display that showed the current political situation throughout their sector of the galaxy. Red indicators marked systems under heavy hegemony control, while smaller green dots indicated known resistance strongholds. "The hegemony knows that someone accessed Marcus's ship," Voss explained. "They've increased security on every trade route and locked down travel between systems. Getting this information to our other cells will require careful coordination and considerable risk." "How many cells are there?" Kor asked, studying the display with the same focused attention he gave to everything that interested him. 47 active groups in this sector alone," Voss replied. "Each one represents hundreds or thousands of beings who have risked everything to fight for freedom. With quantum tunnel technology, we could coordinate their activities for the first time in the rebellion's history." She manipulated the display to show potential tunnel routes between resistance strongholds, creating a network that would allow instant communication and transportation across vast distances. The nearest major cell is on Tethys III, about 6 days away by conventional travel, Voss continued. They're led by a former hegemony admiral named Crix Vander who defected after witnessing a massacre on one of the Rim worlds. If we can get this information to him, he has the resources to distribute it to every resistance group in the galaxy. Then let's go to Tethys III, Zix said, though he could already see from Voss's expression that it wouldn't be that simple. The problem is that Tethys III is currently under siege, Voss explained. The hegemony discovered Vander's operation 3 days ago and has surrounded the planet with a blockade fleet. Nothing gets in or out without being thoroughly searched. Nala frowned as she studied the tactical display. What about using the quantum tunnel generator to go directly there? That would work, except for one critical issue. We need to establish a quantum beacon at the destination before we can tunnel to it. And the only way to place a beacon on Tethys III is to get past the blockade first. The Cubs digested this information in silence. They had come so far and overcome so many obstacles, only to discover that their ultimate goal might be impossible to reach. There is another option, Voss said slowly, as if she were reluctant to suggest it. A much more dangerous one. What kind of dangerous? Zix asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. The Hegemony Council is holding an emergency session on Nexus Prime in 3 days to discuss the security breach on Cathara Prime. Every sector commander will be there, along with representatives from all the major military and intelligence departments. Voss activated a new display showing the massive government complex at the heart of hegemony space, surrounded by defensive platforms and patrol fleets that made Vraxis Station look like a small outpost. If we could infiltrate that meeting and download the quantum tunnel specifications directly into their central computer network, every hegemony system would suddenly have access to the technology. The rebellion could begin simultaneously on dozens of worlds before the Council could coordinate a response. That's suicide, Nala objected. Nexus Prime is the most heavily defended planet in the galaxy. For adults, yes, Voss agreed. But children traveling as refugees? The hegemony has been relocating orphan populations throughout the galaxy as part of their cultural integration program. A transport carrying Zephyrian War orphans to new homes on Nexus Prime wouldn't even be questioned. The workshop fell silent as the implications sank in. They were being asked to walk directly into the heart of enemy territory, carrying the most dangerous secret in the galaxy, and somehow infiltrate the most secure government facility ever built. You're insane, Zix said finally. Probably, Voss admitted. But I'm also right. This is the only chance we'll have to distribute the quantum tunnel technology before the hegemony can develop countermeasures. Once they understand what they're dealing with, they'll lock down every system and hunt down every resistance cell until they've eliminated any possibility of rebellion. Kor, who had been unusually quiet during the discussion, suddenly spoke up. What happens to the Cubs who are already being relocated, the real refugees? Voss's expression softened. They continue to their new homes as planned. We would be adding you to an existing transport, not replacing anyone. And after we upload the information to the hegemony network? Nala asked. You disappear into the refugee population on Nexus Prime while the galaxy erupts in revolution around you. By the time the hegemony figures out what happened, every oppressed world will have the tools they need to fight back. Zix looked at his siblings and saw his own mixture of fear and determination reflected in their young faces. They had already come further than anyone could have reasonably expected. They could stop now, hand over the device to Voss, and trust her to find another way to complete the mission. But something about that option felt wrong. Marcus had entrusted them with this responsibility, and they had accepted it freely. More than that, they had seen what the quantum tunnel technology could accomplish. How could they stop now, when they were so close to giving every enslaved being in the galaxy a chance at freedom? When does the refugee transport leave for Nexus Prime? Zix asked. Voss smiled, and in that moment she looked remarkably like Marcus despite the differences in their species. Tomorrow morning. But are you certain about this? Once we board that transport, there will be no turning back. "There's been no turning back since we found Marcus in the ruins," Zix replied. "We're going to finish what we started." As they began planning the most dangerous phase of their impossible mission, none of them noticed the small surveillance device that had been quietly recording their conversation from its hiding place among the workshop's machinery. Nor did they see the figure in hegemony intelligence uniform who smiled with cold satisfaction as he reviewed the recording from his position deep within the station's security center. The trap was being set, and the prey was walking directly into it. The refugee transport Mercy's Journey was exactly the kind of vessel the hegemony preferred for moving displaced populations, large enough to carry thousands of beings, but Spartan enough to remind them of their dependent status. As Zix, Nala, and Kor joined the line of genuine Zephyrian orphans boarding the ship, they tried to blend in with the other young refugees who had been separated from their families by various conflicts throughout the sector. Voss had provided them with documentation that would withstand all but the most intensive scrutiny, complete with tragic but believable backstories about villages destroyed in rebel attacks. The irony of using the hegemony's own propaganda to infiltrate their capital wasn't lost on any of them. "Remember," Voss had told them during their final briefing, "you're traumatized children who have lost everything. Don't try to act brave or clever. The more helpless you appear, the less attention you'll attract." The advice proved sound as they were processed through the transport's intake procedures. Hegemony officials scanned their documents, recorded their biometrics, and assigned them to dormitories with the mechanical efficiency of people who handled human misery as a routine administrative task. The journey to Nexus Prime took 3 standard days, during which the Cubs were forced to watch genuine refugee children struggle with grief, fear, and uncertainty about their futures. Many were younger than Kor, and all of them showed the psychological scars of beings who had lost everything they cared about. "This is why we're doing this," Nala whispered to her brothers on their second night aboard the transport, as they listened to a group of very young cubs crying for parents who would never come. "So that someday there won't be any more refugee ships." Nexus Prime was everything the propaganda broadcasts claimed and more. The planet's surface was covered by a single continuous city that housed over 50 billion beings, its crystalline towers reaching so high into the atmosphere that their peaks disappeared into clouds. The refugee transport docked at one of hundreds of similar facilities scattered around the planet's equator, each one processing thousands of displaced beings every day. "Processing will begin in 1 hour," announced a mechanical voice as the Cubs were herded into a vast waiting hall with their fellow refugees. "Please remain in designated areas and await further instructions." Zix studied their surroundings carefully, noting the locations of security checkpoints, guard stations, and most importantly, data access terminals scattered throughout the facility. According to Voss's intelligence, the entire refugee processing network was connected to Nexus Prime's central computer system, which in turn was linked to every hegemony facility in the galaxy. "There," he murmured to his siblings, indicating a maintenance terminal partially hidden behind a support pillar. "If we can access that during the confusion of the next processing wave, we should be able to upload the quantum tunnel specifications directly into their network." The plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. While Kor and Nala created a distraction, Zix would slip away from the group, connect Marcus's device to the terminal, and initiate the upload. Once the information was in the system, it would automatically propagate to every connected hegemony facility within hours. They were waiting for the right moment when everything went wrong. "Attention all personnel," a new voice announced over the facility's communication system. "We have a security alert. 3 juvenile Zephyrians traveling under false documentation are believed to be somewhere in this facility. They are carrying stolen technology and should be considered extremely dangerous despite their apparent age." The Cubs felt their hearts stop as security forces began pouring into the waiting hall, armed with scanners designed to detect advanced technology. Around them, genuine refugees cowered in fear as guards began systematic searches of everyone present. "How did they know?" Nala breathed, pressing close to her brothers as the security net tightened around them. Zix's mind raced through the possibilities. Someone had betrayed them, but who? Voss had seemed genuinely committed to the cause, and Arya was programmed by humans who had no reason to work with the hegemony. Unless... His blood turned to ice as he remembered the surveillance devices that were standard equipment on all hegemony installations. Someone could have been monitoring Voss's workshop from the moment they arrived on Vrax's station. "We're trapped," he said quietly, watching as guards systematically worked their way through the crowd toward their position. "Even if we could reach the terminal, they'd catch us before the upload could complete." "Maybe not," Kor said suddenly. His young voice was calm in a way that made both his siblings look at him with sudden concern. "The upload only takes 30 seconds, right? And the device has that dead man's switch Marcus told us about." "Kor, no," Zix said, understanding immediately what his little brother was thinking. "We stick together. We've always stuck together." "And we always will," Kor replied, reaching over to carefully remove the device from Zix's wrist. "But right now, someone needs to create a really big distraction while someone else gets to that terminal, and I'm the fastest runner." Before either of his siblings could stop him, Kor darted away from their hiding place and began running through the crowd toward the opposite end of the hall from the maintenance terminal. His small size allowed him to duck between adult refugees and slip past the first few guards who tried to grab him. "There," shouted a hegemony officer, "the small one has the device." Instantly, half the security forces in the hall began converging on Kor's position, while the other half moved to cut off his escape routes. In the confusion that followed, Zix was able to slip unnoticed toward the maintenance terminal. His hands shook as he connected Marcus's device to the access port and began the upload sequence. Through the chaos of the crowd, he could see Kor still running, still drawing the attention of every guard in the facility. His little brother was buying him time with courage that would have impressed seasoned soldiers. "Upload progress, 15%, the device's display showed. Around the hall, security forces were beginning to realize that they were chasing a decoy, and some of them started expanding their search pattern. 25%. A guard spotted Zix at the terminal and began pushing through the crowd toward him. Nala, seeing the threat, deliberately tripped a refugee carrying a heavy bag, creating a domino effect that sent dozens of beings tumbling to the floor right in the guard's path. 40%. More guards were converging on the terminal, and Zix could see that they would reach him long before the upload completed. He began frantically entering commands, trying to find a way to speed up the process, or at least ensure that the data would survive even if he didn't. 55%. That's when the shooting started. Kor, cornered at the far end of the hall with nowhere left to run, had finally been caught by the guards. But instead of surrendering quietly, he had activated something on Marcus's device that filled the air with a piercing alarm and caused every electronic system in the facility to begin shutting down. The emergency protocols Marcus had built into the device were designed to prevent its capture by hostile forces. If the biometric sensors detected that the device was being forcibly removed from its authorized user, it would immediately begin transmitting all its data on every available frequency, while simultaneously attempting to connect to the nearest quantum tunnel beacon. 70%. Security forces throughout the hall were shouting orders and trying to restore their disabled equipment. In the confusion, some guards had begun firing energy weapons at anything that moved, adding the screams of wounded civilians to the chaos. Zix could see his little brother surrounded by guards who were trying to remove the device from his wrist, while he fought them with every ounce of strength in his small body. Blood was running down Kor's face from where someone had struck him, but he was still conscious and still fighting. 85%. "Almost there," Zix whispered, his hands flying over the terminal's controls as he tried to complete the upload before the guards reached his position. "Come on, come on." 95%. A hegemony officer appeared beside him, energy pistol aimed directly at his head. "Step away from the terminal, rebel." Zix looked up at the officer and smiled, the same fearless smile his father had worn when hegemony soldiers had come to their village. Too late. 100%. Upload complete. Quantum tunnel network activation initiated. The maintenance terminal exploded in a shower of sparks as every computer system on Nexus Prime began receiving and processing the quantum tunnel specifications. Across the galaxy, similar explosions were occurring as the information propagated through the hegemony's own communication networks. On thousands of worlds, Resistance cells that had been waiting decades for this moment began activating hidden quantum beacons. The carefully coordinated rebellion that Voss had dreamed of was finally becoming reality. But in the refugee processing center, three cubs who had given everything for that dream were paying the ultimate price. Zix felt the energy blast from the guard's weapon punch through his chest and knew immediately that the wound was fatal. As he collapsed to the floor, he could see across the hall where Kor lay motionless, still clutching the device that had started a galactic revolution. Nala was fighting her way through the crowd toward her brothers, tears streaming down her face as she realized what their victory had cost. As the world grew dark around him, Zix thought about Marcus and the choice they had made in that cave on Cathara Prime. They had succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The quantum tunnel network was active, the rebellion had begun, and billions of beings across the galaxy would soon have the chance to choose freedom over slavery. The last thing he saw was a shimmer in the air near the maintenance terminal as a quantum tunnel opened, and figures in human military uniforms stepped through. The cavalry had finally arrived, but they were too late to save the three cubs who had made their rescue mission possible. Across the galaxy, the revolution that would topple the hegemony began with the sacrifices of three orphaned children who had risked everything to help a stranger in need. Their names would be remembered in the songs of free worlds, and their courage would inspire generations of beings who had never known what it meant to live without fear. But for Zix, Nala, and Kor, the fight was over. They had kept their promise to Marcus, and in doing so they had given the galaxy the greatest gift of all, hope for a better tomorrow. Years later, when human ships began returning to the galaxy to help establish the new democratic federation that replaced the fallen hegemony, they would place a memorial on Nexus Prime, where the refugee processing center had once stood. The inscription would read, "To three cubs who proved that the greatest power in the universe isn't technology or weapons, but the willingness to help others when they need it most." And in the human settlements of the Andromeda galaxy, their story would become legend. The tale of why alien cubs had risked it all for a stranger, and how that stranger had carried the key to everyone's freedom.